You can calm down, Monique. There's no need to get emotional. That sentence, wrapped in faux diplomacy and laced with condescension, sat in the middle of the conference room like a loaded gun. Nobody flinched. Nobody blinked. Everyone just let it hang there, waiting for her to shrink under it. But she didn't shrink. She inhaled slowly, laced her fingers in her lap and blinked once, the kind of blink that meant, "You've got 5 seconds to walk that back before I show you who you're talking to." Her voice was calm, too calm for the room's liking. "I'm not emotional," Monique said without breaking eye contact with the director. "I'm informed. That seems to be the real issue here." You could hear the AC kick on in the silence that followed. Across the table, seated like smug little kings behind their laptops and catered coffee, the board tried to look unfazed. Tried. But behind the VP's stiff smirk, Monique could see it. The first flicker of doubt. The subtle realization that this wasn't going to go the way they planned. Because she had read the contract. All of it, twice, with a highlighter and a lawyer. And they hadn't. 3 weeks earlier, she was just the new one. Technically, she was brought in as a senior operations coordinator. But that didn't stop folks from treating her like a glorified admin. They'd CC her when they wanted meeting rooms booked, asked her to take notes during project huddles, and somehow always forgot she had a master's in labor relations from Howard, and a photographic memory to match. Monique didn't say much. She never had to. Her power lived in her silence, in the spaces where people thought she wasn't paying attention. On her second week, an email floated around about a new cost efficiency initiative. Nothing official, just whispers. The kind that traveled fast in break rooms and even faster in elevators. The younger staff were panicking, especially those with dependents on their health care. Nobody had answers. Nobody was asking questions either, not out loud. But Monique? She started printing. The original union agreements, the employee handbook, the executive salary reports from the last 5 years, public data, if you knew where to look. She printed them all and organized them in a green binder labeled in gold pen. Receipts. No one noticed. They just thought she liked pastel folders and working late. The day of the benefits meeting, the board came in smiling too wide. Always a sign. Monique sat at the end of the table. She wasn't invited to speak, just to sit, nod, and take notes. That's what they expected. A quiet seat filler. A background black woman. Presentable, polite, easily overlooked. What they got instead was a pause in the presentation slide. Her hand raised at just the right moment, and a voice that said, "Sorry, I just have one quick question." "Sorry, I just have one quick question." Monique's voice was low, smooth, the kind of tone that doesn't set off alarms, until it does. Across from her, Mr. Jameson blinked mid-sentence. He was the new VP of Strategy, fresh from a firm that specialized in leaning out companies by squeezing the most out of the lowest-paid staff. He looked up from his slides, thrown off for a moment by the interruption. Then came the smirk, the smug pivot, the one men like him used when they thought they were about to politely dismiss a woman without making it look like they were doing exactly that. "Sure," he said, resting his hands on the edge of the laptop. "Go ahead." Monique slid a sheet across the table. One single page, highlighted in soft yellow. "I was reviewing the contract from 2019, the renewal that happened just before the acquisition. This clause here, Section 12, Paragraph C, it explicitly states that any modification to employee health care benefits must be negotiated with the Employee Council prior to implementation, which hasn't happened." He stared at the page, blinked, then chuckled like someone who didn't understand the joke but felt pressured to laugh anyway. "That's interesting, but that clause only applies if the Employee Council is active." "It is." Monique didn't blink. "They just didn't respond to your survey because it wasn't sent to their official inbox." Silence. Monique folded her hands. I checked. The email you used in the rollout memo was a defunct alias. The council's correct inbox was listed in Appendix E of the same contract, the one you skipped over in the presentation summary. Another pause. This one different. No more chuckling, no more smirking. Ooh. Someone at the other end of the table started scrolling through their iPad a little too fast, like they were trying to catch up to a moment that had already sprinted ahead of them. Later that day, word spread like spilled ink across the building. She caught them trying to gut our coverage. She quoted the contract to their faces. She brought receipts, literal receipts. People started looking at Monique differently in the halls. Not everyone smiled. Not everyone said thank you. But they moved aside now. They watched her with new awareness, the kind usually reserved for people who know where the bodies are buried. By the end of the week, she noticed the tone shift in emails. The passive-aggressive, per my last message language turned cautious. Considerate. Almost respectful. Almost. But not quite. Because when the company quietly retracted its healthcare rollback memo the next Monday, no announcement, just a quiet update buried in the employee portal, Monique got called into a follow-up chat with HR. "It's just a little debrief," said the rep, with the too tight smile. "Some of the leadership team felt your tone in the meeting was confrontational." There it was again. That word. Confrontational. It danced around black women like gnats, always buzzing, always weaponized. Monique didn't flinch. She just pulled a copy of the HR policy guide from her tote and set it on the table, open to the section on protected workplace speech regarding contract enforcement. "I wasn't confrontational," she said. "I was correct." The HR rep blinked, taken aback by how calm Monique was. Not defensive, not rattled, just prepared. Prepared in the way black women have learned to be, one step ahead, with documentation, clarity, and grace polished like armor. "Well, yes," the rep fumbled, pushing her glasses up. "No one's saying you were wrong, Monique. Just that your tone—" "My tone," Monique interrupted, not unkindly, but with a quiet authority that turned the temperature down in the room, "was professional, firm, and absolutely appropriate for the setting. Anything else is a projection." The HR rep opened her mouth, then thought better of it. Monique sat back, not relaxed, never fully relaxed in rooms like this, but rooted, present, balanced like a metronome, letting the silence stretch long enough for the implication to settle. She knew the rules, she knew the lines they couldn't legally cross, and she knew how often they still tried. That night she sat at her dining table with a glass of ginger tea and her laptop open to a spreadsheet titled Contingencies, Names, Positions, Dates of Hire, Roles Eliminated, Salaries Frozen. A pattern, if you knew how to look. The company had been restructuring quietly for over 6 months, trimming from the bottom, always from the bottom, while the executive bonuses stayed intact. She didn't start out trying to build a case. She just wanted to protect herself. But with every file, every email, every cross-checked timestamp, the story wrote itself. They weren't just careless. They were calculated. By Friday, the whispers returned, this time with a sharper edge. "They're moving her to internal ops. She's being reassigned for a better culture fit." Monique saw the new seating chart before the official announcement. Her name was moved 3 floors down, next to the copy room, in a corner that hadn't seen sunlight since the Clinton administration. They thought she'd panic. Instead, she smiled. Because people like them only saw titles and spaces. But she saw leverage, and she knew exactly what they'd underestimated. Monique had never come for a seat at their table. She brought her own. She spent the next week doing what they didn't expect, being quiet again. No more raised hands, no more emails, no more questions. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes mediocre men nervous. They called fewer meetings. They CC'd her more. And the VP who smirked during the healthcare meeting. He stopped looking her in the eye altogether. Then came the Friday memo. A message from the President and COO, policy updates, departmental audits, a vague reference to recent escalations in employee relations, reassurances about fostering trust and open dialogue. Monique knew what it was, pre-spin. They felt it coming. She hadn't told them about the lawyer she'd been consulting with, the one who used to work in labor protection law and now specialized in wrongful demotions. They thought it would break her, but Monique didn't flinch. She unpacked one box, just one. Inside her laptop, a ceramic mug with "Breathe" in rose gold letters, a framed photo of her grandmother standing proud in front of a sewing machine, and that green binder labeled "Receipts." She placed it right at the edge of her desk, visible from every angle. Let them wonder. Let them sweat. It was from Jameson, the same VP who once called her intense in front of the entire floor. The body of the email, sloppy, frantic, clearly not meant for her eyes. We need to know who's behind the survey. If Monique's organizing anything, we need grounds to document her behavior as disruptive, start compiling interactions, get Amber from HR to pull her timestamps and behavior notes. We can't afford another PR situation. Monique exhaled slowly. They were scared. That evening she didn't go home. Because when she logged into the shared document titled "Speak Now," the anonymous employee report file she'd created, there were now 13 entries, all different voices, all confirming the same pattern. One read, "They moved me to night shifts after I filed a complaint." Another, "I was written up for not being collaborative after asking why we didn't get bonuses." And one just said, "Because every time she'd tried to raise a concern, they hid behind HR jargon and called her hard to manage. Now they were scrambling to look ethical, like a dog walking on its hind legs, trying to convince the world it had always stood upright." But Monique didn't speak at that meeting. She didn't need to. Amber's mouth parted, trying to catch up to the words she wasn't expecting. I didn't mean, I know what you meant." Monique stepped past her, not harsh, not cruel, so just done, and I remember everything. She spent the next week like she had the first, quiet, precise, focused. Except now, people came to her. A woman from facilities stopped by her desk to drop off a folder by mistake. Inside, emails that showed budget cuts had been made months before the staff were told, confirming premeditated decisions. The custodian on the third floor? He'd overheard a few execs in the parking garage months ago talking about reassigning troublemakers. And then there was Darius from IT, nervous at first, kept checking over his shoulder. "I saw the access logs," he whispered one morning in the stairwell. "They tried to access your private folders from a proxy IP, twice. That's a violation." Monique didn't say a word. She just nodded and made a note. Then came the final straw. Friday morning. A mass email. Subject: Organizational realignment. Department changes effective immediately. Her name wasn't on it, but her job title was. They'd eliminated it. Quietly, strategically, like a checkmate played behind the board. But they forgot something. Monique had read the fine print. Again. The moment they announced the elimination, Monique walked to her locker, grabbed the green binder and walked straight into legal's office, not just with receipts, but with a copy of her pre-negotiated severance clause that triggered if her role was terminated without written cause, and a file of every pattern of retaliation dating back 9 months, and 13 sworn testimonies gathered over weeks. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply said, "I'd like to discuss terms before this becomes public," and sat down. Legal tried to play it cool, tried to act like Monique didn't have the drop on them, tried to smile like this was a routine HR discrepancy, but they fumbled. First with the awkward silence as she handed over the binder, then with the stuttering when they realized it wasn't just notes. It was indexed, time-stamped, and color-coded. And finally, with the half-hearted attempt to stall. "Of course, Ms. Brooks. We'll need time to review this. Perhaps we can schedule a meeting with our external counsel." "You have 48 hours, she said calmly, "or I forward this to the Department of Labor, and my lawyer and the New York Ledger." That last name hit, because Monique had done her homework. She knew the paper had just run a 3-part exposé on corporate retaliation. She knew they'd salivate over this, especially if it involved a black woman being targeted after protecting her co-workers' health care. Back in her corner office, yes, they'd quietly moved her back upstairs the day after the labor review was announced, Monique opened her inbox. The subject lines read like little victories. "Thank you for speaking up. If you ever need support, I'm in." "I didn't know how to say it until now, but you gave me the courage." She read each one, carefully, with the reverence of someone who'd once been afraid to speak, too. And then she got to the one that made her pause. From Darius, IT subject. "Something you need to see attached. A zip file. Named simply, Meeting Audio, Jan 28. She clicked. Voices crackled through her earbuds. Male, confident, careless. "Yeah, we'll just shift her downstairs. She'll get the message. She's too sharp, man. We let her keep going. She'll unionize the whole damn company. Just document her tone. That's how you build a case. Make her look emotional, volatile. You know how it goes." Laughter. It wasn't just retaliation, it was a plan. Monique stared at the waveform of the audio. So small on her screen, but it might as well have been a grenade. She saved it 3 times on 3 different drives, then backed it up to a secure cloud. By the time the clock hit 5:42 p.m., she'd already drafted the formal notice. "Dear Board of Directors, attached please find documentation regarding unlawful retaliation, workplace discrimination, and coordinated suppression of protected labor activity." She included the audio, the contract clause, the survey data, and a polite signature. Monique A. Brooks, M.A. Senior Operations Coordinator for now. She didn't send it yet, not just yet, because Monique understood timing. And this needed to land when the lights were brightest. The quarterly shareholder meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. sharp. There'd be cameras, press, executives in dry-cleaned suits giving rehearsed optimism. It was the one day corporate couldn't hide behind closed doors. The one-day spin had to look like strategy, and Monique had already circled it on her calendar 6 weeks ago. The night before, she stayed late again. The office was quiet now, like a theater just before curtain. Elevators dinged softly in the distance. Custodians hummed low while emptying bins. She moved through the halls slowly, deliberately. First, she slid a copy of the audio transcript under the door of the chairwoman's office, printed, dated, watermarked. Then one to the compliance officer. Then one to the legal VP. And then, just before she powered down her computer, she queued up a timed email to every major shareholder, board member, and media contact she'd compiled over the last month. Subject line, "A culture of retaliation. The silence ends now." Send time 9:55 a.m. Right as the lights dimmed and the microphones turned on, the next morning she didn't sit in the back. She walked into the shareholder auditorium in a slate-gray pantsuit, soft gold earrings, and a folder in her arm that said only one thing: prepared. People watched her, Whispers curled like steam in her wake. She took her seat, center row, front section. The CFO started first, rambling about strong quarterly returns and efficiency metrics. The COO followed, smiling too much, hands folded like a politician dodging a punch. At 9:57 a.m., phones started vibrating, first one, then another, then a ripple through the entire front row. Board members stared at their screens, brows furrowed, mouths tightened. Then, the chairwoman leaned to her assistant and whispered something sharp. The projector behind the execs froze. A voice came over the PA. "Apologies, everyone. We'll take a brief recess." Monique didn't move. She just sipped her coffee. Slowly, she could feel it. The shift, the panic behind glass doors, the calculations failing in real time, because they'd built their walls on whispers, and she brought the receipts. At 11:42 a.m., her work email pinged. Subject: urgent request for private meeting, executive board. She closed her laptop. Not in a rush. Let them wait. She gathered her things, stood slowly, and walked toward the glass conference room at the front of the building, where all the seats were once full, and one, right in the center, was now waiting for her. The conference room was quiet when she stepped in. Too quiet. No awkward greetings this time. No forced smiles, just stiff faces, folded hands, and eyes that no longer looked down on her, because now they looked up. Monique didn't sit. Not yet. She placed her folder on the table with a soft thump and looked around slowly, letting the weight of the silence speak before she did. The chairwoman was the first to break. "Ms. Brooks, we understand there have been oversights, serious ones." "Not oversights," Monique said gently. "Patterns, retaliation, discrimination, coordination to discredit protected labor activity. That's not a mistake. That's a culture." The legal VP shifted uncomfortably. "We'd like to correct that culture." Monique raised an eyebrow. "With another canned DEI initiative." No one responded, so she kept going. "I'm not here to be pacified or promoted as hush money. I'm here to set terms." She sat down now, calm, measured, but unshakable. "I want full severance under the retaliation clause. I want signed reinstatement protections for the employees you targeted. I want back pay for the 3 you pushed out last year. I want Jameson's resignation by Friday, and I want a formal apology, in writing, acknowledging what this company did, to me, and to the staff I stood up for." "And if we agree," the COO asked. Monique leaned forward. "Then this ends here," quietly. The chairwoman exhaled. "And if we don't?" Monique smiled. "Then I let the press have part 2 of the story, and this time it won't just be audio clips. It'll be names." The silence that followed was different, heavy with consequence, tense with the realization that they had already lost, because the aggressive black woman they tried to bury. She read the whole contract. She saw the trap before they laid it, and she never raised her voice once. 1 week later, a company-wide email landed at 9 a.m. sharp. "Today, we recommit to transparency and accountability." Buried in the second paragraph, "We thank Ms. Monique Brooks for her courage, diligence, and unwavering commitment to workplace justice." Attached, a letter, apology signed by the chair, and a list of policy changes effective immediately, written by Monique herself. She didn't stay, didn't need to. She walked out of that glass tower in the same grey suit, holding nothing but her phone, her binder, and her peace. Not a single camera caught her. No podium, no parade, just quiet triumph. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a black woman can do is stay calm, stand firm, and show them that the fire they tried to smother was never theirs to contain.